They gave me a clipboard and a waiver at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning. Derek Voss stood there in his $400 shirt, making sure I understood what it meant. Just sign it, Callum. Go home. You're done here. Been a security guard at Meridian Technologies for 3 years. Night shift, mostly. I walked the glass corridors from midnight to 6, checked the server rooms, wrote my incident logs in the break room while the building slept around me. The other guards called me Ray. The executives called me nothing at all. That morning I'd made a mistake. I'd tried to be useful. There was a quarterly all-hands meeting, the kind where the CEO stands at a podium and calls the company a family. I wasn't invited. I'd been on my way out after a long shift when I heard them talking about the new client integration, the one set to go live in 11 days. I stopped outside the open door. I knew what they were building on. I knew exactly what they were building on, because I had written it. I knocked on the door frame. A room full of suits turned around. I told them there was a flaw in the authentication layer, a specific, narrow window, 47 seconds during a forced token refresh, where the handshake protocol would fail under simultaneous load. I told them it would not show up in standard penetration testing. I told them it would show up the first time 50,000 users tried to log in. The room went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then Derek Voss laughed. "That's Ray," he said to the room, like he was introducing a stray that had wandered in. "He walks the building at night." He looked at me over his reading glasses. "We have 4 cybersecurity firms on retainer. I think we can manage without the night watch." A few people smiled. Not everyone, but enough. I nodded and left. Marcus was waiting for me in the lobby, backpack over one shoulder, eating a granola bar before school. He was 16, quiet like his mother used to be, tall in a way that still surprised me. He'd ridden the bus over, because I'd promised him breakfast after my shift. Voss came through the lobby 2 minutes later, phone to his ear, and almost walked into my son. "Careful," Voss said. Not an apology, a correction. Like Marcus had been standing in the wrong place. He looked him up and down the way. Men like that look at everything they don't consider worth their time. This isn't a waiting room. Marcus said nothing. He looked at me. I picked up the waiver from the security desk and signed it. I signed it because I had rent due and a son to feed and no desire to make a scene in a glass lobby at 8 in the morning. I slid it back across the desk and walked out with my hand on Marcus's shoulder. In the car I told him the granola bar wasn't a real breakfast. He said it had 19 grams of protein. I said that wasn't the point. By the time we got to the diner on Clement Street, he was laughing at something I'd said, and I held that with me the rest of the day. I didn't think about Meridian again. Not for 3 days. Then, Marcus's phone lit up with a news alert at dinner on Friday night, and he turned it around to show me. Meridian Technologies hit by major security breach. Client data compromised, systems offline. I read it twice. I set down my fork. "Dad," Marcus said. "Yeah," I said. I went back to eating, but I thought about that 47-second window all night. The breach was bad. By Saturday morning, the story was everywhere. 230,000 client records. 4 enterprise accounts frozen. Federal notification requirement triggered. Meridian had gone dark. The board had flown in. They'd hired a 5th cybersecurity firm, and the first 4 were still on site. Nobody could find the door in. I know this because an old colleague called me Saturday afternoon. Her name was Priya, and she'd been a junior developer at a small contract firm 11 years ago. When I was the lead architect on what was then called Project Foundry, she'd gone on to bigger things since. She was now one of the 4 firms who couldn't find the door. "Ray," she said, "tell me you still have your notes." "I have everything," I said. I thought the work-for-hire agreement meant they owned. "They own the code," I said. "They don't own my memory." She was quiet for a moment. "I shouldn't be the one calling you." "No," I said, "but I'm glad you did." She gave me a number for a woman named Elaine Marsh, who had taken over as CEO 8 months ago and inherited the whole situation along with the corner office. I didn't call it. I thought about it for 6 hours, ate dinner with Marcus, helped him with a history essay about the Army Corps of Engineers, and called the number at 2 in the morning. Elaine Marsh picked up on the second ring, which told me everything I needed to know about how bad it was. I told her who I was. Told her I knew the system. I told her I could be there in 20 minutes, she said. "I don't understand." You're the night shift guard, I said. Yes. I'm also the man who built what you're standing on. I'll explain when I get there. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in front of a terminal in the main server room with 4 exhaust cybersecurity professionals watching me from the doorway and Derek Voss standing behind them with his arms crossed, saying something to the man next to him in a low voice that I chose not to hear. I found the window in 11 minutes. It was exactly where I knew it would be. The force token refresh, the handshake gap, the load collision vulnerability I had flagged in the original build notes, and then again in a memo 3 weeks before I finished the contract. The memo was in their records. Nobody had ever read it. I worked quietly. I don't talk when I work. I never have. Marcus is the same way. He'll sit with a math problem for an hour without making a sound, just moving his pencil in slow, certain lines, and when he looks up, he has the answer. I used to think he got that from his mother. Now I think he got it from me too, and we just never had the right problem in front of us at the same time to notice. 4 hours and 12 minutes after I sat down, the system came back online. I heard someone exhale behind me, then someone started clapping, and then they all did. And I turned around in the chair and accepted it for exactly 5 seconds before I stood up. Elaine Marsh was at the door. She was in the same clothes she'd probably been wearing since Friday. And she looked like a woman who had spent 3 days being told by smart people the problem was unsolvable. She was looking at me the way people look at something they should have seen a long time ago. "Mr. Callum," she said. "Ray," I said, "your original contract." She had a folder in her hand. Someone had pulled it, probably Priya, probably hours ago. "You were the lead architect, the whole authentication layer." "And the encryption stack," I said. "And the base session logic. The 4 firms you hired spent 3 days trying to read my handwriting without knowing it was mine." She looked at the folder. She looked at me. "You tried to tell us last Tuesday." "I did. And Derek asked me to sign a waiver and go home," I said, which I did. The room was very quiet. I could hear the servers running behind me, calm and steady, doing exactly what they were designed to do. "Name your terms," she said. Had thought about this in the car. I hadn't thought about money, which surprised some people in that room, I think, but didn't surprise me. Money was a thing I understood how to live without. What I couldn't live without, I was already carrying. 2 things, I said. First, the original architecture contract gets amended. My name goes on the foundational build documentation, not the work-for-hire boilerplate. The actual technical record. If this system is ever in a history of the company, my name is in it. Elaine nodded before I finished the sentence. Second. I paused. There's a kid named Marcus Callum who's going to apply to the engineering program at Hargrove University in 14 months. When his application comes across anyone's desk at this company, anyone who sits on that board, anyone whose name is on a scholarship committee, you make sure they read it all the way through. You don't owe him anything. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking you to make sure nobody throws it in a pile because his father walks buildings at night." Elaine Marsh looked at me for a long moment, then she said, "Done." I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. Priya was in the doorway. She reached out and shook my hand without saying anything, which was exactly right. I drove home in the early morning dark, the city quiet and pale around me. Marcus would be asleep for 2 more hours. I'd make him eggs before school and not tell him most of this, not yet. Not until there was something worth showing him, rather than just telling him. But I'd tell him one thing. I'd tell him that a man who does honest work, who knows what he knows, who says what he sees and then waits, that man does not disappear. His work doesn't disappear. You can hand him a waiver and wave him out of the room, but what he built stays. And sooner or later, the building needs a man who can read its bones. He'd probably say that sounded like something from a history book. Tell him that was fine by me. That's exactly where I intend for it to end up.